Is Oregon's schedule getting tougher? Keep an eye on a couple of games.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. Today's episode brought to you by friends over at FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Ohio State is, well, a lot closer than it was yesterday anyway, 24 hours to be exact. But I'll talk about that and whether game day is a lock. Has Oregon done themselves any favors to get College GameDay into town? And is Austin Novosad ever going to play for the Ducks? That's an interesting question to ponder during the bye week. But I was thinking about this because Oregon's schedule coming into this year, I think was about as favorable as you could have asked for if you're a Duck fan. You get Ohio State at home, you get Michigan on the road. That's the easier split between those two games. You don't have Penn State, you don't have USC, you don't have Iowa in there. Overall, kind of works out. And so a lot of this schedule that gave me the confidence to pick Oregon to go 12-0 coming into this year was that every team outside of Ohio State, Michigan, maybe Wisconsin, maybe Washington, but the Huskies are off to a slow start. We'll see how they play by the end of the year. Was kind of like, Oregon's going to roll. Oregon's going to roll over these teams. And I think there will be plenty of games. Like UCLA is every bit as bad as I thought they would be. I think they're going to get boat raced by LSU this weekend. But there are a couple games that I think can be tougher. And I am just glad that Oregon has them at home. Tougher than I thought they were going to be coming into the year. So a couple games to watch for Oregon fans. First one is Friday night. That is tonight as you're listening to or watching the show as it comes out. And that is Illinois at Nebraska. When Illinois beat Kansas in week 2, I was very surprised. Now, Kansas proceeded to lose to UNLV the following week. That's a high-level G5. Like UNLV, Boise State, they're in that same sort of class. Illinois is going to Lincoln, and if they push Nebraska to the end, I'll be even more impressed. They're already slightly better than I thought. And I had on Sonny Verma of Locked On Illini before the season started, and he expressed a no confidence level. That was him on his side of things. He said, "Yeah, I don't have any faith in Oregon in Illinois going into Oregon and putting up a fight, winning this game. I think it'll be a blowout." Still could absolutely be that. Illinois is playing much better football than I thought they would. Luke Altmaier is yet to turn the football over, which is a notable development for the Illini quarterback. I'm glad Oregon has that game at home. And then here's the one that you should really watch because I think the Illinois one is worth monitoring. And I'll talk about a couple teams on Oregon's schedule that don't look quite as good so far. But Michigan State and our old friend Jonathan Smith are playing Boston College on the road this weekend. And if they win that game, Michigan State will be 4-0 with a pair of Power 4 wins. They will have beaten Maryland, who admittedly is not that great, but they beat them. Just saying. And if they go beat Boston College, who I think is a respectable team at the very least, they're 6.5-point underdogs. But if they go win that football game, I'd look at Michigan State a little bit differently. And remember, Michigan State is on a Friday night. Now it's at Autzen. That's the good news. I wouldn't want Michigan State playing confidently going into that game. Aiden Childs is really talented. He turns the ball over a little bit too much, as a lot of young quarterbacks do. But we've seen Jonathan Smith pull a fast one on Dan Lanning once before. I'm not raising the alarm. I'm just saying these are things to watch. Because Oregon fans going into this week of college football probably looking around and wondering, well, what should I do this weekend? Look, I'll always advocate for hitting the golf course, obviously. But there are a lot of college football games to watch. Those are the two teams, though, that I think have raised their profiles and could do so again, particularly Illinois. If Illinois goes to Lincoln and wins, it is full on, let's be worried about the Illini and how they could push Oregon, because we've seen two teams not as good as Illinois would be if they, beat Nebraska, or teams that don't look that as good maybe, Boise State perhaps, that you've then got coming, or that have already come into Autzen Stadium and push the Ducks. So a couple of things to watch for there. Now, there are a couple teams on Oregon's schedule that are not as good as I thought they might be. Purdue at home last week against Notre Dame, and Notre Dame is good. I know they lost to Northern Illinois. Classic case of playing down to the level of your opponent. Notre Dame is good. I think Notre Dame at the end of the year has got at least 10 wins. They could have 11. More than likely they have 10. And if the Northern Illinois loss keeps them out of the playoff, look, I'd be here for it. That could also help Oregon, because then if the Ducks don't win the Big Ten championship and they're pushing for an at-large spot, having one team removed from that equation and having it be Notre Dame with no conference championship and a loss to Northern Illinois at home, that could be a favorable situation for the Ducks if it's coming down to, Oregon or the Irish for either a playoff berth or a playoff home game. So that's something to watch. But Purdue, they did not look good. I think they're going to lose in Corvallis this week. So we'll see how the Boilermakers hold up. But that game might not be quite as scary. But again, it's college football. You never know. Michigan State could be a little scarier. Wisconsin, though, I believe they lost Tyler Van Dyke for the season, their starting quarterback. That game doesn't look quite as intimidating. I bet you by the time that game rolls around, which is later in the year, 2 weeks before Washington, that game is in Madison. Oregon was a 10.5-point favorite in the preseason. I don't believe that line's currently available to look at, because they're probably waiting to see whether or not Van Dyke is going to be able to play or how Wisconsin looks with the backup quarterback. That game, still going to be a tough environment, might not be as tough of a team. That game could end up looking a lot like the Oregon State game if the season continues progressing like this for Wisconsin. And then one other team that I want to mention is Michigan. They play USC this weekend. I think they're going to lose. That game doesn't look nearly as difficult right now as it did before the season. Now, maybe Michigan proves me wrong. I am not in the boat that the Wolverines can just change quarterbacks and figure it out, because if Davis Warren beat out Alex Orji for the starting spot, yikes, because Warren was horrible, absolutely horrible. They're making a change at quarterback this week. I suspect Michigan. Here's what I'd advise to Oregon fans if you watch Michigan at all this weekend. Don't get caught thinking that whatever they look like this weekend is automatically how they will be by the time the Oregon game rolls around, because there's a long time between now and then, and they have a lot of things to figure out. An offensive identity and whether they can run the football, 50 to 60 times a game or however often they want to do that, how they throw the football, whether they can push the ball down the field in any way, shape, or form. They have a lot of questions to answer. They might answer some or all of them by the time Oregon goes to Ann Arbor. So I wouldn't get too caught up in that one, but certainly against Texas, number one team in the country at the moment, they didn't look very good. If they look bad again against USC, I'm not saying to relax. I'm just saying look at that game differently. So I think a couple teams, Illinois, Michigan State, have their profiles rising, and I'm really interested to see how they perform this week. And I think there are a couple teams that are kind of going in the other direction. Purdue, Michigan, maybe Wisconsin. Washington so far is about what I expect. I thought the Apple Cup would be a tight game. I think they're going to be right around a 6-6 football team. So Washington hasn't surprised me so far. Let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments, or hit me up on X, formerly known as Twitter, at @McLaughlinCFB, or at Locked On Ducks. Those are the handles. Speaking of big games that Oregon will play, or a lack thereof in some instances, Ohio State's going to be a big game no matter what. I still expect Oregon to be 5-0 going into that one. But how should we feel about the prospects of College GameDay coming to Eugene? Because that's the only chance for Oregon to be on there this year. That's coming up next. Coming up right now, eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. They have superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered, obviously, with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit. Only available to U.S. customers. Today's second segment sip, by the way, you might notice a pink tint. Simply Raspberry Lemonade. That's not a paid sponsorship. That product is just so unbelievably good. I can't buy it very often. Ridiculously high sugar content, and I can't stop drinking it. It's one of the most phenomenal beverages on the planet. You put that in a glass of ice, that's all I need in life. That's really all I need. Let's hop into the mailbag here. YouTube comments, X, formerly known as Twitter. You can do that, or you can become a Locked On Ducks insider. That link in the description below. You get priority mailbag access and a bunch of other perks as well. You can get a free 14-day trial. One of you over there in the flocks sent me a question that says, hey Spencer, this question's a little bit projecting, but it's a bye week, so why not? I couldn't agree more. I know College GameDay is not the end-all be-all, but it would be really cool to see it in Eugene for Ohio State. However, I worry with Oregon falling in the rankings and the other big games that day, it could be passed up, maybe the Red River, especially if Oklahoma beats Tennessee this week. Thoughts? I agree it's not a be-all, end-all. I love when College GameDay goes to Eugene. I saw the clip going around Twitter the last time it was there when UCLA came in 2022 and Oregon was 5-1 and UCLA was 6-0 and they were both ranked inside the top 10. And, UCLA couldn't wait to run our old friend Chip Kelly out of town. They did, and they just got blasted by Indiana on their home field. So, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. But I think that and I don't think Deshaun Foster's stupid, just to be clear. I just don't think that he was the right hire for a head coach at a program that should be more serious about football, but just isn't. So, want to make that very clear. I think for Oregon, it'd be great for that Ohio State game to be game day. I still think it's the favorite to be the College GameDay selection because, yes, Red River is absolutely an option, and that is going to be a massive game. It always is. You've got Ole Miss going to Death Valley to play LSU, but they've already featured LSU once this year. Now, Oregon was featured on Game Day twice a year ago as the road team, the Washington game and the Utah game. Both times they were away from Autzen Stadium last year. So the last time it came to Autzen was UCLA of 2022. So you've got Ole Miss, LSU, and the LSU game that when they were on Game Day, they were on the road. That was in Columbia, South Carolina. So that wouldn't necessarily be a major deterrent, but it could be a factor in College GameDay's decision to say, hey, we've already covered an LSU game, but they won't have covered an Ohio State game. They won't have covered an Oregon game. I think that's a feather in the cap of what should be one of the biggest games in the Big Ten this year. You've got Penn State at USC. Now, that brings the same intriguing element as Oregon-Ohio State in that it's a new Big Ten matchup. Now, that one's being played in Los Angeles. Look, just ask yourself this question. If Lee Corso still gets to make any decision there, do you think he wants to go see the Duck or the Trojan? Come on, man. Come on. But that could be a really good game, especially if USC beats Michigan soundly this weekend, which I think they will by at least 10 points. USC could be undefeated going into that particular game. Texas, Oklahoma, yeah, it's huge. It's massive, but they just about never feature the same team 2 weeks in a row. I don't know the last time that has happened, and the following week is Georgia, Texas. So if I'm College GameDay, I look at that Oregon-Ohio State game and say, yeah, Oregon struggled in the early going, but if Oregon is still 5-0, if they blow the doors off UCLA, if they beat Michigan State comfortably, then I think everyone will forget more and more about the Idaho and the Boise State games. Plus, Boise State's good. Like, Oregon didn't play well, don't get me wrong, but that is not the same level of performance as the Idaho game was. The Idaho game was far more of a disaster, and yet Oregon still won the football game. So that's what'll matter most of all, is can you put in the ESPN scorebug undefeated top 10 teams, Oregon, Ohio State. I think that's the game that does the best ratings that week, and Ohio State's a big reason as to why, because they're one of the most watched teams in college football every single year. And if you're trying to highlight the new conference that is the Big Ten, yeah, you can make an argument that Penn State and USC is really good. To me, from a television and branding standpoint, I think that's second because Oregon's got the Ohio State game in there. So I still feel solid. But certainly if Oregon goes and blows out UCLA and wins comfortably against Michigan State, you do yourself a lot of favors. I think the most important thing, though, is you win those games. As long as that happens, I fully expect it to be there, and I hope Oregon fans get to experience that. I hope that's a showcase moment for the new look Big Ten that Oregon's a part of. I really do. Can't guarantee it, but I think the biggest saving grace for that game. And look, I don't think Tennessee is going to lose to Oklahoma this week, even though the game is in Norman. I think the Vols are going to win. They look much, much better in the Sooners, and I trust them a lot more right now. If Oklahoma's got a loss on the resume, and then Oregon doesn't, and Ohio State will not, they both play Michigan State, who, a little better than we thought, but should they be able to beat either Oregon or Ohio State? No, they shouldn't. And Ohio State is not going to lose a conference game. They play Iowa for their other game leading up to October 12th. I don't think Iowa's going to score a point. I really don't. I think Iowa's going to get shut out in Columbus in that game. So Ole Miss, LSU, I'd watch for that one. See how those teams progress in the coming weeks because, LSU's a big brand. Death Valley is awesome. Ole Miss will be undefeated. That'll be a heck of a football game. But I'm just, not that this is everything, but the asking price to get into Ole Miss LSU is 113, for Oregon's 266. I'm just saying. That's according to wherever ESPN.com links their tickets to. So, good question. I love that. Another one of a Locked On Ducks insider, that is, being another one of you out there who I very much appreciate, asked, what should the Ducks be doing to get ready for Ohio State? Two things. Number one, get healthy. As I talked about on yesterday's show, I think you need Jeffrey Bossa at full health, at full strength, making plays, calling the defense, out there for 90% of the defensive snaps for this defense to be at its best. He's clearly not 100%. So get him right this week and get him back to being his usual productive self against UCLA and against Michigan State. And I think Michigan State will be a nice tune-up of sorts. And, as I talked about earlier in the show, that might not be a game that feels like a tune-up, and there could be a lot more stress involved in that one. You got a really good coach. You got a really talented quarterback. We'll see if they go to 4-0 this week when they're done playing Boston College. But they're going to run the football a lot. We know that about Jonathan Smith. And Ohio State is going to run the football a lot. And so you look at the Boise State game, for instance, and I think Oregon State's run defense, or the run defense against Oregon State, was phenomenal. The Boise State game, it was really good right until it wasn't. They had a couple bad fits. Can't do that against Ohio State. You got away with it. You snuck by against the Broncos. Can't do that against Ohio State. So get healthy and shore up the run defense, because Will Howard is a capable quarterback. Doesn't scare me. Does not scare me the way that the idea of Chip Kelly calling plays for Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson, the running backs for Ohio State, that is far more terrifying, and their ability to control the game with the offensive line and the ground attack, that scares me a lot more and makes Will Howard a lot more effective than does, hey, we've got you in a 3rd and 6, Will Howard's got to drop back and make a play. Now, he's got a couple of ridiculously talented receivers in Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Ibuka. And Smith, the true freshman, he's their leading receiver right now. Howard so far this year, 65% completion. He's thrown for 520 yards in 2 games, so about 260 per, 4 touchdowns, no picks. Solid, capable, about what I expect from him. But get healthy, shore up the run defense. That is what Oregon has to do to get ready for Ohio State. Another question came in. This is a long-term one, but you know what? It's bye-week time, and it's a great time to think about these sorts of things. Will Austin Novosad ever play for the Ducks? Well, let's answer that question next. First, let's talk about FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel. You know why? They're America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you right now, in addition to the best sportsbook in America. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. Do you want to enhance your viewing experience? Do you want to bet on college football all at the same time? That's what FanDuel is allowing you to do. Then, all you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel any time. Plus, if you want to bet Oregon games, either way, if you want to cover yourself mentally and say, I don't think Oregon's going to cover this week, whatever the spread is, you can do that. If you think Oregon's rolling, they're 1-2 against the spread so far this year. I'm 0-3 picking Oregon against the spread with my score predictions. Alas, I continue to soldier on. If you've got the confidence, you can go bet it over at FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. It's that easy. FanDuel.com, that's the place to go to download America's #1 sportsbook. Couple more questions to wrap up today's show, one of which concerns Austin Novosad. So, Austin Novosad, the one-time Dante Moore replacement in the class of 2023 at the quarterback position after Moore flipped to UCLA, he is not the number 2. We saw that on Saturday against Oregon State when Dante Moore got in for a drive and, it was at the end of the game. Oregon was blowing him out. And Dante Moore was 3 of 3 throwing the ball for 50 yards. And I'll talk about more, 15 yards, just to be clear. I'll talk about Dante Moore in just a second. I'll talk about him again in just a second. I was doing everything I could to avoid saying I'll talk about Dante Moore more in just a second. But Austin Novosad has a very real future with the Ducks in which he never starts a game. It's possible. He's a number 3 guy, would have been number 2 if Dante Moore hadn't transferred in, but alas, he did. And whenever this season comes to a close, which hopefully is on like January 8th, 9th, whenever the national championship ends, there will be plenty of off-season topics to discuss here on the show. And one of them primarily will be, what's the quarterback situation? Is it Dante Moore? Is it a battle? I'm sure Dan Lanning will get asked about it every way to Sunday, and he will just mentally tear his hair out that he has to answer questions about it at all. He had a few comments at a press conference the other day where he said, yeah, I mean, that's for those guys, not for you guys to know. And by the way, I have no problem with him saying that. I've asked Dan Lanning questions before. I think he gives answers in a way that he feels, satisfies his job requirement and benefits the program, and he's not going to do anything else. And that's all that I care about. Like every now and then, you see people that might say, oh man, why is he being so short? Or why is he doing this? I'm like, I don't care. I want Dan Lanning to win football games. Whether or not he gives great, loquacious answers does not affect me in the slightest. I can create content for you guys either way. That's my job. His job is to win football games. And so far, he's doing that, which is a great thing to see. So for Austin Novosad, we saw in the spring game, he was the most surprising standout player to me. He had a bad interception, but man, he made some special throws. So did Dante Moore. Dante Moore looked really good. Both guys threw a ball that Terrence Ferguson should have caught and just dropped. Pretty sure Tiefer got one of the drops. I know he did on one of Novosad's throws. It was a tough catch, but still one that Tiefer, I'm sure, expects to make. But Novosad was zipping the ball. He was making reads. Ball was on time, on target, good delivery. He looks like he's bulked up. This is a guy who can be a starting quarterback at the college level. I don't have any doubts about that. Will we see him play in a game this year? Probably not. Does that make it hard for Oregon coaches to, give him a real opportunity to be their starting quarterback? Not really, because they see him in practice. It's hard for us to conceptualize the idea of him starting as Oregon's quarterback one day. But I think for Novosad, he's got to just put his head down, get to work, and hope the coaching staff goes into spring camp with an open mind. With the idea of, hey, we believe Dante Moore is going to be the starter, but we're going to give Austin Novosad a shot. If you ask me right now, where would I place my money if I had to, or if I was allowed to, on where Oregon will be at the quarterback position next year, I'd bet on Dante Moore. That's the most likely outcome. It's certainly not the only outcome, though, because you saw Novosad look really good. It just might be a case of the quarterback room was too crowded. We see why Dylan Gabriel's a starter. I know why Dante Moore's the backup, but maybe the coaching staff does want to see it play out. Or maybe they've told him already, hey, we're going to go with Dante Moore, and when the winter transfer portal window opens, Novosad decides to hit the portal. In which case, just like Ty Thompson, I'd wish him the best of luck and hope he finds a starting quarterback job. And, Ty is the backup down at Tulane. Novosad could go somewhere and start. He could go somewhere and be the backup. There are a lot of talented quarterbacks out there. So will he ever play? The likelihood seems less, even less than it did going into this year. But is it impossible? No, not technically. Just realistically, it might be. And it's not because he's not a good kid or that he's not a good teammate or that he's not capable of being a good player. Oregon's just got a lot of talented guys. I think that's what it'll ultimately come down to. But we'll have that answer. I think he, reminds me a little bit of Malik Murphy at Texas, where he transfers, he goes somewhere, and I think that once he puts his name in the transfer portal, he'll have somewhere to go. I think he'll be able to find an opportunity to go and compete for a starting job if he doesn't feel that he has that opportunity. But if he sticks around, he at the very least is thinking, okay, I will have the chance to compete for the starting job, and I want to battle with Dante Moore. So that's what I feel. That's how I feel on that, and I think there are a lot of different ways it can go. I don't care how it goes. I just want the quarterback position to be set up for success for the Ducks going forward. Another question came in. Lots of insider questions to wrap up this week. Do we miss Dante Thornton at wide receiver or Troy Franklin? Now, this question was actually intended to mean Dante Thornton because Thornton is thriving over at Tennessee. He accidentally asked about Troy Franklin, and I wanted to talk about both because I think it's a testament to how great of a job Junior Adams has done. Troy Franklin just had the best singular receiving season in the history of Oregon football. Because he sat out the bowl game, he doesn't get the receptions record. Yardage, touchdowns, single season, Troy Franklin sets the record. Ask yourself this question. Do you feel like Oregon's missing anything at the wide receiver position? Because I sure don't. Even though one of their top 4 guys from last year is hurt. Even though a former 5-star recruit hasn't been able to play. That being Gary Bryant Jr. and Jurion Dickey, of course, the injury in the 5-star. And yet I look at Oregon's receiving corps and they've been awesome. I don't know, knock on wood. I cannot think, correct me if I'm wrong in the YouTube comments, I cannot think of a drop that the receiving corps has had. They're creating explosive plays. They're winning 1v1s. They're making guys miss. They're phenomenal. And so, do I think we miss Dante Thornton? Sure, it'd be cool to have him, but do we miss him? No. And that's the incredible thing, is Thornton's good. He always was, just never quite clicked in the way that he wanted it to while he was at Oregon, but he's over at Tennessee, and you can watch him play Oklahoma this week, and you'll see Dante Thornton, explosive wide receiver, downfield threat. When he and Troy Franklin together, it was, hashtag unleash the skinnies, and he's been unleashed a little bit over at Tennessee. Good player. I'm not surprised by that at all. But that Oregon doesn't miss him and doesn't miss Troy Franklin, I think he's just a major feather, maybe 7 feathers in the cap of Junior Adams and what he's done with that receiving corps. Getting guys to return, the production, the depth, the consistency. I feel like they're always supporting Dillon Gabriel in every way that they can. And that there are not a lot of position groups. Like losing Troy Franklin at the wide receiver spot, the equivalent on the perimeter of losing Jackson Powers Johnson at center. We saw a drop-off along the offensive line, at least for the first couple of games. No drop-off at receiver. That's pretty incredible stuff. Evan Stewart turns out very talented guy. Last question on the quarterback front. Would Oregon win the Natty if Justin Herbert was at quarterback? Well, 2 questions. First of all, why can't they do it with Dillon Gabriel at quarterback? What have you seen to make you think that he can't lead Oregon there? And then number 2, which Justin Herbert are we talking about? Because the college Justin Herbert and the NFL Justin Herbert, they are the opposite of the Spider-Man meme. That's like Spider-Man pointing at Batman. That's not the same guy. Now, if you put Herbert in Will Stein's offense, yeah, you'd have a higher ceiling than what you have with Gabriel. Would it radically shift to where, Oregon's national title odds would be different? No, I don't think so. Because as I've said all offseason, you can win national championship with Dillon Gabriel quarterback. He's efficient. He's effective. He's a veteran. He executes the offense. You give him time to throw, guy's a playmaker. He's not the biggest guy, but he's more than good enough to succeed in college. Would you give yourself a better chance with Herbert? Sure. You give yourself a slightly higher ceiling. Just like it was a higher ceiling offense with Bo Nix, and that's fine, but it's an interesting hypothetical. I don't think it would change dramatically if you had Herbert in there. But again, college Herbert, NFL Herbert, these were 2 different guys, and I'm glad he's gotten better. I'm glad he's got a real coach, and I hope the Chargers, if not the Seahawks, win the Super Bowl this year. Thanks for making this your first listen. Go make Locked On College Football your second. I host giving you the biggest stories in the greatest sport on planet Earth, which is in full swing. No Oregon games this weekend, but plenty of other college games to be aware of. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.